Hello everybody, welcome to Tousi TV and to the first live stream of the day. We're going to be giving you guys all the updates from British politics and beyond throughout the day. But we're going to start by talking about what happened last night in Scotland. There was a by-election. Surprise, surprise, the Labour Party did well, the SNP got destroyed, and the Tories were having a nap, and all the other parties are irrelevant. But it is a by-election, so we're going to be talking about all that in the live chat. Hello and welcome to everybody, all the familiar faces and usernames, let's just say, and all the newcomers as well. Let's talk about last night, because there is a lot of rumours going around about the direction changing inside the SNP again. But it's not really a surprise anymore. Margaret Ferrier, do you remember Maggie? Maggie, who is the bestie to Nicola Sturgeon, broke the lockdown rules, even though she kept pushing and pushing and pushing for more restrictions on people in Scotland. And then, whoopsie, she got into trouble because she got tested positive. She kept travelling up and down from Scotland to England and going to Westminster. So that is the reason why we had this by-election. Now, this by-election was good news for the Labour Party and Mr. Shanks. Yes. So I'm going to analyse what actually happened in regards to why we had the result that we had. But what's going to happen going forward potentially, because everybody is being biased. So the Tory supporters are coming up with excuses. The Labour supporters believe that they are now taking over the world. And the SNP believe that everybody is just basically a Nazi. So... Right, first let's talk about the actual result, kind of consistent with the recent by-elections where we had essentially the trend. So Rutherglen and Hamilton West, we had the Labour Party, Michael Shanks, winning the election by 58.6% of the vote share. Huge, brilliant, 24% point swing. The SNP went down to 27.6%. The Tories, embarrassing for Thomas Kerr, but not really that surprising, 3.9%. They went down by 11.1%. Then you have all the other smaller parties basically continuing to be irrelevant. The Liberal Democrats, the Scottish Greens, and Reform UK, 1.3%. Not really a good showing for a smaller party that wants to be ambitious for the upcoming general election. It's the same trend that we've seen for Reform UK, the recent by-elections and the recent actual national election, the local elections that we had across the country. But again, it's still early days. And tomorrow we have the Reform UK Party conference, and I am going to be there to report live from the conference, and I'm going to be asking serious questions about the direction of the party and why Reform UK is still not performing. But again, as we said, it is early days. Anyway, so we have the SNP's one of the worst performances because every by-election we've had throughout the history of the SNP, they have never lost any of them, whether they are in administration, government in Scotland, or if they're in opposition. This is the first time that the SNP have lost a Westminster by-election, and this is going to be completely embarrassing for Mr. Useless or Hamza Yusuf. But this is going to be quite inevitable in terms of what's going to happen in narrative in Scotland. A lot of people are saying, well, both Labour and the SNP are as bad as each other, but then at the end they'll pick one anyway. They have to pick between Labour and the SNP. But this narrative is boring. You don't really achieve anything in politics if you just go around stating the obvious. It's like when people walk around and see a politician saying, oh, he's a liar. Well done. Or saying, oh, that politician is a globalist. Like, yes, they're all globalists. All the mainstream politicians are globalists. It's all saying the SNP and the Labour Party are left wing as bad. Yes, we know that. What are you going to do about it? So a lot of the pundits I've seen on the mainstream media has been completely crazy with stating the obvious. I'm going to come to the live chat. Just a quick question for you guys, because I just saw Sheila saying in the live chat, sound out of sync. What? Hang on, can somebody give me a feedback? Can you hear me properly? And my mouth and everything else. Otherwise, it's Sheila's internet connection. All right, let's go back to the news. So that's the inevitable situation for the Scottish politics right now. This is a massive swing towards the Labour Party, 20.4% from the SNP to Labour. So those who are saying that, well, by-elections don't matter, by-elections have small turnouts, low turnout. Yes, we know that. Every by-election has low turnout, and so you have to judge by-elections with other by-elections. It's the trend, okay? It's the trend that matters. So I'm going to show you the reaction, the crazy reaction from the Tories and, of course, the Labour Party and all the others, because they just come up with excuses. All right, sorry, the SNP, not Labour. This is the map of Scotland. It's very yellow. This was back in 2019, where we had 1 Labour seat and 48 SNP seats and 6 Tory seats and 4 Liberal Democrats. And then if we go with the current trend, this is what's going to happen to Scotland. Scotland, on its own, will be a coalition. It's hung parliament, although there are a lot of the tiny Labour seats dominating. So if you do the boundary changes and actually make those seats bigger, the Labour Party will come down. But Labour will have 42 seats, SNP and the Tories both on 6 seats, and the Liberal Democrats on 5, Reform UK no seats, and the Greens no seats either. Obviously, they never get seats. So when it comes to Westminster. So that's what we had. But the Conservative candidate, Thomas Kurtz, come out to make excuses. I mean, it wasn't even a close contest. He's saying he's blamed his party's defeat on tactical voting. Every election has tactical voting, especially by-elections. If you knew this was going to happen, then you could have just forfeit from the beginning. If it were close elections, I would be like, yes, Thomas, I agree, I get it, right? But it's nonsensical as an excuse. Every election has tactical voting. Mr. Kerr said he was disappointed after the Scottish Conservatives won just 1,192 ballots, or 3.9% of the vote, and lost their deposit. The councillor, Thomas Kerr is also a councillor, said that tactical voting squeezed the Conservative support while voters were keen to send a message to the SNP. Of course, the voters were keen to send a message to the SNP. This was primarily an anti-SNP election because of Margaret Ferrier being an idiot, and everybody dislikes Humza Yousaf and Nicola Sturgeon. So why do you think they should have trusted you, Thomas Kerr, or your Scottish Conservatives as the alternative when you guys have not been able to provide any alternative? If the Tories want to be serious in Scotland, like what they were under Ruth Davidson, and I do not like Ruth Davidson, but she was pretty good as a leader for the Scottish Tories, then you have to be serious. You have to have a proper programme. You have to have a charismatic leader rather than Douglas Ross or whatever. But that's what we had. And then the Labour Party are getting very excited. So they're saying we are now looking at a potential SNP wipeout across Scotland. So we have the Scottish Tories and the Scottish Labour Party, both sides are attacking the SNP, and then the Scottish candidate, the Conservative candidate, is surprised why everyone's attacking the SNP. When your party and the Labour Party are both attacking the SNP, of course the election is going to be made about the SNP. I mean, use your little brain. It's not that difficult. It's not rocket science. So this is the reality of the situation. So bye-bye, Maggie. You've been an absolutely terrible representative for the area. Well done, the Labour Party, but again, it doesn't really mean that people love you. A lot of the socialist or left-leaning bloc votes in Scotland are always there to switch between the SNP and the Labour Party. It's not really new voters going to the Labour Party. They're all socialists. So the issue that we have is how many of the so-called conservative-leaning Scottish voters are going to be staying at home or going out there to vote Reform UK or Liberal Democrat, because the Tory-leaning vote in Scotland is likely to vote for the Liberal Democrats, but not completely. So it depends on the constituency. John Johnson says, Richard Tice, Reform UK got 400 votes. So much for Richard Tice. This is the thing. I mean, there is a trend right now, we were saying, and I think we've been saying it's early days for Reform UK for the past 2-3 years, right? We've had the national election, local elections across the country. Reform UK flopped. We have had all these by-elections kind of flopped. Compare this to the progress that UKIP made at the time. Compare this to even, obviously, Brexit Party. I know that was a whole different situation. But compare this to the early days Labour Party when they started, the first couple of years. Compare this to the early days of even the Liberal Democrats. So this is why we're going to be having the reality check Maya, we'll be covering the excess death debate. I think it's the 20th. Yes, absolutely. So I'm bringing back Andrew Bridgen on the show soon to discuss all that as well. And I'm trying to get a couple of scientists from both sides, because there are a few scientists still bravely saying that there's no problem with excess deaths. So I want to bring them both sides on the channel. It's going to be difficult to get the other side to come on, but we'll try our best to have some sort of balance on the show. But we'll be covering all that as we get closer to the date as usual. All right. Anyway, let's talk about why the whole country is in trouble because of a lack of political leadership. So all these issues that we are talking about, from excess deaths to the HS2 debacle and everything else we have, goes back to the establishments, because we as people keep voting for the same parties, right? Now, you can't really blame the public for this mess, right? Completely. Because by-elections don't really get this enough attention in the media, and parties don't really have the same amount of resources that they do in America, for example, even the Labour Party or the Tory Party. But it doesn't matter. If the turnout is low, the Tories or the SNP cannot blame it on that, because every by-election the turnout is low. And when the SNP or the Tories win a by-election, they don't mention that the turnout was low, only when they lose. So it's the same with the Labour Party as well. The Labour Party, every time they win, they're not mentioning low turnout. Every time they lose, they say, oh, there was a low turnout. Oh, shut up. It was a level playing field. It was low turnout for all of you. So clearly the problem is that you can't get your own supporters out to vote. The Tories on 3.9%, Thomas Kerr is complaining, saying tactical voting is why I lost. Even if tactical voting, you fix that problem, how on earth are you going to go from 3.9% to 58.6%? You see the gap, Thomas? That's not how it works, politics. And Reform UK, obviously, as I said, a bit of a flop as usual. David Stark, but I'm going to continue by saying it's early days. We'll see how the general election goes. The general election is the biggest test for Richard Tice and Reform UK, for them to see, is it a problem with the lack of communication with the public, media and everything else. Although Richard Tice has a national show on Talk TV before, now GB News. Or is it a problem with the leadership? Is Richard Tice not the best leader? Or is it just that there is no appetite? Despite people complaining about the main two parties, there is no real appetite for just any alternative political party. I don't know. Let me know what you think. I don't know what David is saying. That's right. Yep, FDNHS. Brilliant. Family friendly show, guys. And what else do we have? I'm going to go back to the reaction from the other parties as well in a second. We have the best politicians. We have the best that the politicians money can buy. Yeah, I mean, sure. Barely no one has even heard of Reform UK down south where I live. Actually, to be fair, that is a very good point as well, because there has been enough elections now, and by-elections and local elections and everything else, for Reform UK's name to be mentioned in the media, even in the media and newspapers. And I would love for someone to start, I mean, I can't be bothered, but if someone wants to go out there, do a video, just go around your local areas, film and ask people how many of you know of Reform UK. Let's see how many people actually do know. Barry says, hi, I'm late. Can I have a recap? We'll do a recap in a second, Barry. Don't worry. We'll give you guys all the updates of what you have missed. What do we have? Green. James Cameron says, Maya, if you're struggling with insomnia, the Green Party conference is on Sly News. I completely forgot that the Green Party also have conferences. I mean, who cares about them? But yes, James, that's a very, very good advice. If you can't sleep, definitely watch that. Although, not really, because the Green Party conferences, they do say the craziest things. It's sort of like the Liberal Democrats. So it's kind of exciting to see the communists chat nonsense all the time. All right, so Margaret, let's talk about what's happened. Margaret Ferrier, bye-bye Maggie. She's gone as an MP because she's a hypocrite, and while she kept pushing for more lockdown restrictions, she was the one breaking all the rules and everything else. But one main issue we've had is that the rise of the Labour Party means that Keir Starmer could get a majority in Westminster, right? The Labour Party won the by-election last night, and the result was a little bit embarrassing, a little bit, for the Tories, the Liberal Democrats, and Reform. It's less embarrassing for the SNP because it was expected. Let's see what you're going to have. Derek Mills says no subtitles again. I'm not really in charge of subtitles on YouTube, guys. I don't. YouTube has automatic captions, and I don't think they do it with live streams. I don't know, actually. I don't know. I don't know how it works at YouTube, but I'm not in charge of the subtitles existing or not. So, yes, that's the result. As you have seen, 58.6% vote share for the Socialist Party of Keir Starmer, and that's 24 points change for the Labour Party from 2019. The SNP have lost their first by-election, first Westminster by-election in the history of the Scottish Nationalist Party. So that's also not good news for Humza. But this 20.4% swing from SNP to Labour, people are saying, well, if you go with this number and if you go with the trend of the recent by-election, this is what you're going to have. This is what you had in Scotland. This is 2019, where the SNP had 48 seats and Labour only had 1 seat, to this. A bit of a mess, but Labour will be on 42 seats. The SNP will be on 6 seats, and the other parties are irrelevant as usual. So that's what we have. Let's go back to the live chat, and then I'm going to give you the rest of the updates, which is about the reaction from the Scottish Con-Socialist Party. You are doing a sterling job. Thanks, Maya. Thank you so much. You guys are doing a great job supporting the channel. YouTuber doesn't know how the platform works. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm the most technophobic YouTuber in the history of YouTube, I can assure you. Labour said the Scottish public trust the Labour Party again. They definitely don't. Nobody. I mean, there's a core Labour base that abandoned the party to go to the SNP for the past few years to punish their Labour Party for being terrible. They've simply gone back. There was a segment that GB News did earlier today. They were going around the constituency to ask the public how they voted, if they're happy that Labour won. There's a lot of older pensioners who said they were always socialists and they're happy that Labour won. And I'm like, of course they're happy that the Labour won. They're walking around the high street in the middle of the day and saying, well, we like socialism. Well, yeah. Do you expect them to be sad that the Tories have lost? John Johnson says, when Labour win the next election, the migrants will arrive by personnel jets. Well, no, because it's bad for the environment, John. They're going to be given hoverboards and bicycles and everything else to help the environment. But they will come, yes. They will eventually get here. I mean, we can't really say the Tories have made it difficult for them to come. But right, let's go back. Thomas Kerr, the Tory, I'm just reading the live chat. There's a lot of crazy comments this morning, today. Thomas Kerr, the Tory candidate who lost, who only received, 3.9% of the vote, is crying because he's blaming his defeat on tactical voting. It's like he's just discovered the concept of tactical voting. It happens at every election, especially by-elections, and it's your job to prevent tactical voting weeks before the election. It's the job of the political parties and the candidates. If you lose, do not blame the players. Now, even if tactical voting wasn't as strong in the last night's election, you can't really go up from 3.9% to 50%, Thomas. It's just completely crazy. And he's angry, saying the voters simply wanted to send the message to the SNP. What else did you expect them to do? I'm not really sure what these people are teaching these new candidates and political activists in these parties, but clearly a bunch of amateurs are joining parties these days. So they fled from the SNP to the SNP 2.0. Labour is literally going to be the same as the SNP, just with a better ability at lying. Well, yes, because the Labour Party have more experience at lying. The only difference we're going to have is that the Labour Party will make it more likely for Scotland to become independent because they're going to cause more division. The SNP being in power actually helps the cause of unionism because the more they're in power, it's just natural. The incumbent, after a few years, you become a boring, tired establishment. You are no longer a rebellious movement. So the whole point of the SNP, the whole point of the Scottish separatism is supposed to be a rebellion. If you are in power, I think this is the intentionally or unintentionally the beauty of the devolution. I do not like devolution as a project. I do not like what Tony Blair did, but one of my theories is that at least unintentionally, this is what devolution has achieved by creating a platform for the SNP, that were the rebels, or the Scottish nationalists, to actually become government. And by becoming government, they become establishment, and that way they can't really keep pushing their rebellious agenda. So they have tried in the past, over the last 10 years or so, especially since the referendum, saying, yes, we are the rebels. And people say, but you're in government. So that's why I'm saying that obviously devolution was absolutely terrible. It makes no sense. But also, it's not really devolution. It's not decentralization. It's they've created secondary centralized powers. But that's the one good thing that's achieved is this. So if Labour dominates Scotland again, don't be surprised that within the next 10, 20 years, the sentiment to leave the Union, the kingdom, would go up. Because the SNP or the Scottish nationalists will be in the opposition again. So they can just go around and shout and cry. Laurie says, I'm in Scotland and I don't want either Tories or Labour. We need a brand new party. They have totally destroyed Scotland. Just look at what Nick Nack did. We need someone who loves the country and people. To be fair, Laurie's right, but the issue we have is that loving the country and the people is also not enough for politicians or a party to be competent. How many populist parties, right-wing populist or left-wing populist parties you've had, where political leaders say the right things, people get excited. Ooh, this person is saying all the things I like to hear. Then they get into power. At best, they just fail to deliver. At worst, they have directly lied to you, and they just completely become hesitant to do anything. James says, silly take, Mahyar, silly take. Scotland is crumbling under the SNP. I'm not really sure James listened to my rant just now. This has nothing to do with what I just said. So, for those of you who just joined now, I talked about how the whole point of the Scottish separatism was supposed to be a rebellious movement, and devolution as a project terrible. But one good thing unintentionally is done is that it gave power to the SNP to be in government, and by being in government they became establishment, so they're no longer rebellious. So the cause of separatism has gone down. But if Labour dominate again, like before, the cause of Scottish independence will come up again because the SNP will be in opposition. I wasn't talking about domestic policies in Scotland. I wasn't talking about the crime going up or drug death related stuff going up and the SNP destroying the NHS. I wasn't talking about any of the domestic policies. I think a monkey down the road in London would know that the SNP have destroyed Scotland in terms of domestic policies. Nobody was talking about the domestic policies. Everybody knows that. We were talking about what it does to the cause of separatism. Right. Night Cow 87 says, I am for the Union, but I am for Scotland. It's not hard to do both. I think that, well, to be fair, so far it is still the majority in Scotland. People, I have to repeat myself every few months. Because of the mainstream media and giving so much platform and airtime to the SNP and their narrative, there was this tendency, a lot of people believed that the SNP is Scotland and everybody in Scotland wants to leave. Not only every single opinion poll, the trend, but also the referendum we had just a few years ago showed that more than 50%, way above 50%, more than 55% of the people in Scotland want to be in the kingdom. And the majority, vast majority in Scotland, hate the SNP. So the SNP getting about 30-40% of the support and getting the government doesn't mean that people in Scotland are as crazy as the SNP minions. So what we had is that we have a couple of SNP minions getting airtime, talk nonsense on TV, and people in England getting frustrated and saying, well, if the Scottish want to leave the kingdom, let them leave. But they don't want to leave. It's one crazy voice saying it. It doesn't mean everybody else in Scotland love the SNP. So this is what we have to fix. If people in England, if those who care about the kingdom want to protect the kingdom, then, and I know that Michael Gove spent a lot of taxpayers' money a few years ago to start some sort of union unit in Downing Street. I don't know what happened with that. I don't know how much we spent on that. The whole point of that was to counter the propaganda from the SNP, right? To help the cause of union. I don't know what happened with that. But if these people really want to fix the kingdom and protect the kingdom, all you have to do, just create a campaign to remind people that the SNP only has a minority voice in Scotland. So it's not above 50%. And in fact, as a PMK says, the SNP hates Scotland. The SNP care more about their ideology than the actual country itself. They simply want to be in power to implement their own socialist ideology. I never voted for independence. We are better united. Laurie says, I also want to remain in the union. Also, I do want to make it sound more sexy going forward. So that's why I keep saying kingdom, not union. Remain in the kingdom. Oh, now it's going to trigger people. People don't take jokes. People are going to say, Maya loves Charlie. Oh, calm down. Yeah, it's who get the microphone, that push we all wanted. There's also this issue with the lack of opposition in terms of press and media in Scotland, which has to be fixed as well. Old Bootnicks, thanks for pointing it out, Maya. I'm sick of people tarring us Scots with the same brush. The SNP is not Scotland. Yep. Lone Star says, SNP or Labour, burning or drowning, take your pick. Yeah. I don't know what the version of it would be for the Tory option, but yeah, I mean, they're all as bad as each other at this point. Waxing Miracle says, I want to let Scotland go. We have someone who doesn't like the Scottish nation. Krabby says, sadly, the Scottish one's a bit broke. Kingdom Hearts. Oh, okay. What else? I love the Scots. Okay, there's a couple of people who don't like Scotland, but the rest of the live chat seem to like Scotland, so that's nice to see. The whole country is not fully divided. It's only partly divided. It is actually also fascinating that since the Act of Union, which has not been the perfect thing, by the way, but it's relatively worked till now, despite all the turbulences and all the divisions, the kingdom remained relatively stable, until now at least. With all the stuff that's happened over the last few hundred years, it is fascinating how they kept going as a kingdom, as a whole, all of them. Obviously, at the end, there was an issue with the Irish, and the Irish left, and we got a chunk of them left. And that question is not going to be resolved anytime soon, unless the Republic of Ireland somehow decide to invade Northern Ireland. But that political question needs to be... at this point, it requires patience and a generational shift because there's a problem in Northern Ireland where even the younger people from both sides, if they have parents who are loyalists and unionists or the other way, they become pretty active early on. But that is becoming less of a trend. Less fashionable. So Generation Z in Northern Ireland are becoming slightly, especially in the cities like Belfast, becoming slightly less kind of involved as the millennials, but definitely before millennials, every generation until now, even the younger generation got pretty much active from the age of 12, 13. But if that goes down, then we could actually have a democratic decision in Northern Ireland. People will grow up and will be like, okay, let's see what the majority want. Are they still unionists or do they want to join the Republic of Ireland? But until then, we have to tolerate this chaotic situation between the extreme side of the Sinn Féin supporters and the other side. Right. Very nice to see the SNP gone. But Labour, oh dear. It's not a good swap. I know. Not only the Labour Party domestically, when it comes to domestic policies, they're also as bad as the SNP, but it also helps Keir Starmer get a majority in Westminster. What we have? My fellow Scots are too stupid and ignorant to look at the Scottish Family Party and how good they would be for Scotland. And the problem I have, any party, any political party, small party, or alternative party, it's the job of the parties and politicians to make their party look credible and famous. You can't just sit there as a party and wish for people to like you. And just going out there, knocking on some doors and having a couple of events with your supporters is not really good enough for parties to rise up. Learn from the past. Learn about how the Conservative Party, 200-300 years ago, came up. Learn how after the Tories, obviously. Learn how the Liberals came up after the Whigs. Learn how the Labour Party was created and came up so quickly. But going out there like the Liberal Democrats for the past 30 years have been moaning and moaning. Oh, why don't people like us? Just shut up. It's your job to make it so. It's your job to make your party look better. The Greens complain, the Reform UK complain, UKIP complain, they all complain. Stop complaining and make your parties better, or just give up. Lone Star says, I do like Douglas Ross. Scotland just won't go right. No, Scotland's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. What else do we have? Count Dankula for First Minister. Absolutely. I have not seen Count Dankula in ages. I think I saw him last year in London. We went to a bar. For those who know, the Players Piano Bar in Westminster. No, that was 2 years ago, I think. That was a couple of years ago. Time flies. All right. Anyway, just wanted to let you guys know about this crazy update that everybody's overreacting for some reason, as usual. The Tories blaming the voters, the Labour parties thinking that they're taking over the world, and the SNP blaming, I don't know who they're blaming everybody else. The Liberal Democrats are shouting from the basement, and Reform UK are still on 1%. But we'll keep you guys posted throughout the day. We're going to have a couple of very important updates today, actually. So throughout the day, for those who are not familiar, we'll come to you guys with some small, short videos, updates. But also later tonight, we're going to have 1 or 2 more live streams, live shows, to go through a more in-depth discussions, depending on the topic. Thank you so much for all the support and all the love. I'll see you guys in a few hours. I'm Mahyar Tousi, and we are the media.